to High Stakes, episode 22. I'm your host, Neil Orfield. You can find me on Twitter at PlayerQDFS. High Stakes is produced by Mike Lawrence. You can find him on Twitter at Awesemo. And today our guest is EMac. You can find him on Twitter at EMac DFS. EMac won the 2007 Fantasy Baseball Grand Prize, which was a trip for two to the MLB All-Star Game in the Roto format on ESPN season long. He won again in 2008 in the head-to-head format just to prove that he can do it in multiple formats. He had to go back and win again. And EMac has been doing DFS content since 2012, 2011, 2012. Maybe you can clarify for me there, EMac. But EMac has been doing content, DFS content for forever. He is a great player. He doesn't play high stakes. He plays mostly low stakes, but he crushes at those stakes and has done very well for himself playing on DraftKings and FanDuel. EMac, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me on the show, Neil. I've listened to, I believe, all of your episodes, all 21 or 22 that there have been thus far. Thoroughly enjoy this platform and thrilled to be joining you today.
Yeah, you were my 22nd guest. I guess we would break up Jordan Cooper's episode into two parts because it was so long. So however you want to define that, yeah, you are. I call this our 22nd show because you're our 22nd guest. And I'm really excited to have you on, especially because you are, as everybody knows, a future president of the United States. I've got my EMac 2024 shirt on, so I'm excited to interview you. I'll start with a question about your presidential campaign coming from Choke Hold'em, who asked, what party are you running for?
That's a great question. I think we'll have to come up with the party. It will be not going under one of the current two-party structures, because let's face it, things are kind of broken in the U.S. today. There are asshats on both sides. Shall we just leave it at that? And we need something new. So the platform is a pizza in every oven. I think that's an attainable goal. Pizza makes everybody happy. We can have vegetarian, we can have gluten-free, we can have whatever we want. Pizza in every oven. We're going to be nice to each other, and no more lying. We're going to be truthful. Those are the three tenets of the EMac 2024 platform.
I was going to get you with a gotcha moment on your pizza because, you know, there are gluten-free people, but then you came right out and said you can have gluten-free pizza. So you're really open to pizza for everybody. How about no assets? Is that also part of your political party?
Yeah, that's being kind. That's being rather kind to some people. When did we turn into such a disaster of a human being, of human race, shall we say? It's across not just the U.S. either. So
yeah, it does seem worse in recent years. I would say probably forever is the real answer, but
yeah.
It does seem more open in recent years that people are fighting a lot. On that note, I also got a listener question from Seth1374, who I imagine might be a political rival of yours. I'm not sure. He wants to know why you are the worst.
He is my sworn Twitter enemy. We are bitter rivals, but we talk all the time in Discord. So it's a lot of fun. He's a really good guy, really sharp guy. We like to find different angles of how to approach the different sites. We keep each other apprised of overlay, and though he is not quite in my age bracket, he's closing in on being a fellow old. So we have to stick together.
Yeah, I don't really know much about Seth other than if you post anything positive about EMac on Twitter, Seth is going to come in with a counterpoint to undermine your positive point about EMac. Or if you say anything about EMac, he's going to come in.
I think he checks my mentions. I don't know how. I can tell when people tag me and stuff, but I think he searches out everything. It seems so.
So you don't know how to sort people's mentions because you're an old, as you just said, just not a big Twitter. Okay, all right. Enough on the political platform. Enough on your rivalry with Seth. Let's get into your background. Let's talk a little bit DFS and fantasy sports in general. Let's get right into it. I'll start with the questions that I ask every guest. What kind of background do you have in statistics? Do you have formal or informal training?
So good background in analysis. I went to school and studied accounting. I'm actually a CPA, though I'm not practicing. I still do hold my license and have to do an ethics exam and all that fun stuff to maintain it as an inactive status. But so I did accounting and finance for a decade plus. all sorts of forecasting, things of that nature. Worked in real estate, worked in biotech, so a lot of R&D background, stuff like that. And then I moved over into, got a little bored. It's the same thing, you know, weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly, lather, rinse, repeat. It's kind of boring. So I moved into HRIS, which is human resource information system. So kind of your payroll system, stock system, stuff like that at one of the biotech companies. And then I moved from there, I moved into compensation. So that's kind of my regular job now. I've been doing it for close to 15 years. So people say, oh, well, what is compensation? What does that mean? So essentially what that means is I oversee, I usually need to work at a company that has at least 2,000 people. Typically, it's going to be at a national headquarters more often than not, though not always publicly traded. But right now I work at a company that has 25,000 people, you know, $2 billion in payroll. So I help oversee offer letters, bonus plans, the annual salary planning cycle, build out salary structures, figure out what we should pay people, you know, counter offers, stuff like that. So anything related to money, or equity or bonus, I have a hand in usually. And this company is rather large, so there's a team of about 5 of us that do it. Most companies I work at, it's just me or it's 2 people. So that's kind of the background. But it's like DFS in that one, you're constantly analyzing. The difference between that and DFS, you never know when you're going to be right. I can come up with great ideas, what's best practice, come up with a unique thing to solve for a particular issue, but the time horizon to measure it could be years, and then you won't even know did people leave because they hated the manager or they didn't like the plan you put into place, right? So you never know for sure. So it's a lot like DFS, right? But DFS, you at least get that instant gratification of, was I right in this moment? That doesn't mean I'm always going to be right, but how did I do in this moment? So that's sort of what appeals to me for DFS. But so while semi-formal training, really good in Excel, but no programming skills. I went to school before the internet existed. I started out on Excel 2.0 back in 1990. So yeah.
So I didn't even send you the questions, but because you've watched all the episodes, you knew that my next question was going to be about computer programming. So no real experience there. Yeah, you do so much content that I didn't even realize until today, as I was kind of looking through some of your stuff. I was like, wait, EMac is not a full-time content guy, and you play small stakes, and it's because you are so busy with, you have a day job on top of all of the content you put out on top of playing DFS. You have fulfilling demanding day job, so that's pretty impressive. Let's get into your background. So I mean, you kind of explained your job to us a little bit, but how about outside of that? Let's get into your DFS background and maybe any related hobbies. How did you get into, first, I guess you could ask, you could start with, how did you get into DFS?
Sure. So I stumbled across DFS. So I started playing in ESPN, right? So like when I started fantasy sports, we looked at the newspaper once a week and sporting news or whatever, and wrote up things by hand. And when my buddy and I figured out how to download, and it wasn't called an API back then, but we figured out how to download like stat files and write a macro that would calculate our weekly rotisserie basketball and baseball leagues, we thought we were like super smart. So that was fun. Again, internet didn't really exist. Like you dial out, but you didn't see anything. You just got information back to your computer. So that was sort of my first foray into fantasy sports. So I loved it. I thought it was great. It was interesting. It was fun. And then played on ESPN for quite some time. And find a bunch of people, like-minded gamers, right? So we didn't really have, there's no Twitter or anything like that, but there was message boards. So people would kind of recruit you to be into one of their little groups, and then you would play against these other little groups or little tribes, and we had our own little intricate scoring systems and whatever. But it was like, all right, let's find a bunch of hardcore people. So that was like the hardcore everyday DFS players, they'd be in that kind of stuff if DFS didn't exist. So that was a lot of fun. And then from there, that's where you had mentioned at the beginning, where I won a couple huge prizes actually at ESPN. So what they used to do is index your leagues, and they were pay leagues. You had to pay, like, it worked out to like $9.99 for a league, and if you bought 5 of them, it was like $7.99. And the reason you paid, you win a t-shirt at the end. Woohoo, who cares about that? Or you got points at the ESPN store. But people paid a little bit of money, they're probably going to try, as opposed to free leagues where people draft and then they just quit. So what they did is they would index your league score with all of the stats, how your team did within that, and then how your league did against all the other scores, assign you a rating. And that's how I came in first in those years. So playing against a couple 100,000 leagues, all the people, et cetera. It'd be like the equivalent of winning like back-to-back Wildcats on DK, or back-to-back slams, basically. So not like, oh my God, back-to-back Millie Makers, but no, it was like the biggest thing out there back then. There was a trip for two to the All-Star game, right? And like a $1,500 Best Buy gift card and ESPN store credit and stuff like that, a jersey, whatever, whatever the package was. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. So my wife thought that was pretty cool. So I got to go to the St. Louis All-Star game. And then the next year we went to Anaheim, was where the All-Star game was. And so we got to go to do Disney parks during the day and the baseball stuff at night. So that was fun. And the third year I got 10th overall. Again, and she's like, well, how come you didn't win? I'm like, do you know how hard this is? No one's ever won twice, and I did it in 2 different disciplines. And she's like, well, but I wanted to go to Arizona. That would be nice to go to Arizona. I'm like, we'll just go to Arizona. You don't have to wait for
you don't have to win something yet to go on vacation. Okay, so I'm very curious about this now. I didn't realize. So how, to the extent you're willing to share, like how big were the prize pools for winning these things?
Oh, that was the prize. The grand prize was literally triple. Yeah, the 1099 was like between $5,000 and $7,000 each year.
Okay.
Each of the 2 years I won.
And did you know,
hotel and airfare and all that? So
did you know, like going into the final week, that you were in competition for this? That you were like towards the top of the leaderboard?
You could tell where you were. The first year I won it, it was a random year where there ended up being 3 extra games after the regular season, and back then they used to count them. So there had to be a game 163 in one of the things, and then the winner of that had to beat another team because they would have been tied for something. It was this whole thing, and I ended up like just barely skinning your teeth winning. But the important thing is what is the strength of your league? And in the league when I won it was actually the guy who had won it the year before.
Wow.
So I was asking, hey, what do you get? What did they do? Tell me what you get. Because they're real, like, you win a trip for 2, and there's like no other details.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a little like, you think it's shady, but then you get there and you get the lanyard and the placard and all the passes, and you hang out with, or you would be at the hotel with all the ESPN personalities and stuff like that. So
that's cool. Very cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that, like, so the Tournament of Champions, the only live final I've ever been to, kind of similar in that there's not a lot of information. Like, I was scouring the internet for like anything I could find on what did I win here? What's involved in this? And there's just not a ton of information.
Yeah. What they don't tell you is, oh, here's tickets to the Celebrity All-Star game. Here's tickets to the Futures game. Oh, here's this. Oh, you can go to this ESPN thing. And oh, yeah, we're sorry, we'll send you over here. And you're like, but that would have been cool to know all that before we got there. But hey,
yeah. Cool. So the first year, the first Tournament of Champions was at the Super Bowl, right? It's in Florida, in Tampa Bay, and we got to do the NFL experience. And they gave us these special bracelets. They didn't tell us that the bracelets could get you into anywhere you wanted at the NFL experience. So like, you could cut the lines. So everybody went, and we were like, saw these huge lines, and we all kind of were like, all right, I'm not going to bother with this. I'm going home. We learned after the fact, just because there was one couple there who like had to go back. Somebody forgot their bracelet. And when she went back, they told her, and this gets you can cut all of the lines if you use this. So they were the only people who knew that you got to cut the lines. So yeah, it's not always the best communication. I think that it's gotten better over time though. All right. So you were great in the season-long space in fantasy sports. And that was 2007, 2008, you won those contests back to back. And then 2009, I guess you got 10th. So when and how did you then get into DFS?
So one of the people I was that was in the competitive leagues with me, he told me about, I forget if it was Draft Street or FanDuel, but those were the first 2 I played on. And so I didn't understand what they were. So he sent me his like referral link. It's like, oh, if you click through my link, we each get $10 or whatever. So we did that. And then it was FanDuel that I remember playing on at first. And then I found Draft Street, or vice versa. But the Draft Street way back then, they used to put like their weekly winners gross totals up. And there was this guy named Hicksville Hunk that would like always be up around $20,000, $30,000 a year. So I thought this was some like money laundering operation. I thought this thing was highly illegal. I was never into online poker, so I had no bearing to understand that. And I was just like, what do you mean? I've just been paying $9.99 for a year-long league. Now you want me to pay how much is this guy winning again? So I was, and being an accountant, I'm like, this doesn't math out, right? It doesn't math out. So I was incredibly skeptical. And then we realized, all right, well, I guess we're allowed to do this. Your next thought was, oh my God, where have you been all my life? This is the greatest game ever. So
Yep. I know that feeling. Yeah, I love
those
DFS
were my
right
two
off.
thoughts. Dear God, this is illegal and they're laundering money, or oh, you beautiful thing.
I think we all had kind of that same transition of like, is this okay for me to do this? Like, is this legal? Because we can't sports bet in Minnesota. I think that's true in a lot of states. And DFS at that time kind of felt similar. But yeah, I came from the season-long space and loved season-long fantasy sports, and that kind of was kind of a natural transition to DFS. Although at the time when I started, I didn't realize that they are very, very different games. I think that's not always apparent to people that DFS and season long are extremely different games, although, involving a lot of similar skills. So I think if you're good at one, you can be good at the other if you put in the work, generally, I would say. Were you a winning DFS player right away?
Yeah, I actually lucked out. And I think after, I only ended up depositing a couple $100, and then I ended up, this is way back when, they used to, like, it was a Friday contest or a Sunday contest would be like a $10 entry fee, and there'd be like 500 people in it. And you'd be, oh my God, it's a $5,000 prize pool. And the winner would get like $500, and second place would get like 400 and 300. Like, so it was like, if you got in the top 10, you like did very well. And that was really it. And mass multi-entry really wasn't, like, people would put in 3 or 4 or 5 lineups. I don't even know if there were lineup caps back then. You built everything by hand. Obviously, there were no projections. There were no starting lineups pages. Twitter didn't really exist for sports. It barely existed as much of anything at that point. So that was kind of the first foray into it. And I ended up, there's a site called Daily Joust, and you ended up winning. They did I forget what for some joust of champions or whatever, but they had a 12-seat contest, and it was, I think it was like for $12,000 or $15,000, but first prize got $5,000, and you had to win in, and so there were only like 12 contests to win in on, and I think you had to beat like 300 people. It was like $1 or $2 or whatever it was. Maybe you had to beat 500, whatever the math works out to be to get that prize pool. And so I ended up getting a seat, and I ended up winning that. So I won that in September of 2011. So okay. that would have been right like 2 months into doing it, and all of a sudden I got $5,000. So kind of from that point on, I've never, I move money between accounts, or I'll, use my credit card to get a deposit bonus. I've never gone in the red since then. So technically I've never, been a losing player. I've had 2 calendar years where I've lost. But one, I was up big and ended up losing. That made me rethink my approach to, I'm probably going to keep the day job. Oh, I don't know how this happens. And, dear God, I just, blew 80 grand. That was the dumbest thing I could have done. And that helped me recalibrate to say, you know what, let's put this in perspective. I'd like this to be fun. It is a lot of fun. Let's change our goals. Let's change the approach of what I'm doing. And that was kind of where I said, I'm good with the day job. I'm good doing all sorts of content, and I'll still play, compared to the average person, a lot. I put in, somewhere between 100 and 120,000 a year in entry fees. That's like $300, $400 a day, right? So it's not like huge money, unless you explain to your wife, how much, because we'll look at our taxes. How much did you do? Like, no, it's the same couple $1,000s over and over, and then I withdraw, and then it's over and over and over, and then I withdraw. No, so I'm not depositing, right? So she's like, oh, okay. I said, if I start depositing or you see stuff on credit cards, then we'll talk. Until then, just where I am. I'm up in my office, glued to the computer. So.
I've seen your account balance. I know that we take a different approach. You keep a lot of money just sitting there so you can play and not have to worry about it. I'm constantly withdrawing, depositing. Maybe I need to take a little bit more of your approach, because that seems just.
Well, if that goes back into the joint account, then it's like on the radar. I'd rather just keep it there and then move it over, 10 grand at a time or whatever.
Yeah. So. All right. So you hit on why you are not playing such high stakes. But we got that question from Michael Campbell, actually DM me to ask, when are you moving up in stakes? It sounds like not anytime soon. You don't have any plans to move up in stakes?
No, and here's why. And I don't think it's a bad thing, right? And it all comes down to what do you want out of it. So for me, I mostly play on DraftKings right now. And because I'm not yet at my $1 million in entry fees, I can still play any contest entry size. So I was mathing it out the other day. So I think I'm going to skip NFL aside from Showdown on DraftKings today. And I think I can stretch it into, I'll make it next year before I hit my $1 million. I might be able to squeak out one more year of like baseball, hockey, and basketball, which I prefer much more than NFL. So I'm kind of rethinking that. But I've already started looking for NFL. I'm going to be moving over to Yahoo or FanDuel. I want to try something different. You know, DraftKings is fun. I think it has the best user interface. I like full PPR, I like everything that they do, but I don't really want to go against the people in the higher dollar amount. Now, it's not, I will play anybody at one lineup per whatever at any entry fee. I'm not worried about that, or I don't want to duck them, but I also will play all these slates to win all these crowns to get the rewards programs. So if I forget a slate, which I usually do 4 or so times a week for hockey, Showdown, or soccer, EPL on a Sunday or whatever, and I'm donking off $20 at a time, I don't get mad. I just put in a decent placeholder lineup. Sometimes it min gashes. Sometimes I forget about it. I now taken to setting alarms on my phone to remind myself I've got these lineups out there. Sometimes the alarm goes off. Like, what the hell is this for? Turn it off and forget, oh yeah, I've got money out there. But if I'm going to lose that stuff, I don't want to have to get mad and get angry about it. So that's where I'm sort of staying at the lower dollar amount. But you know, like a normal NFL weekend, I'll have $2 or $3 grand in play across all the different betting and sports and sites and whatever. That's not small potatoes. I used to do, when I thought I might go, not necessarily pro, but like do this high volume, I was playing like 10 grand a weekend, like 6-7 years ago. And I'm just like, that's not where my headspace is. I don't want to do that. And when you lose, like, what's the point? And then I'm grumpy, and then I got a day job, and I got it right. So it's just like, yeah, it's not worth it. So whatever I put in, if I lose for the day, it's like, what else? I forgot there was a rain out, there was whatever. Just, you don't let it dominate your life. Yep. Find different goals. So my goal is to make the Onyx tier in DraftKings or FanDuel. I'm looking to see what they have. And some of the, Yahoo, I've got a whole bunch of deposit money from when they first started that never expires. So I got to play through that or whatever. So there's always, I like to look for the game within the game. I like to test out all of our different content, our different tools, different strategies. Doing content so much, you lose a little bit of the joy for what you're doing. So it's always fun to do NASCAR, or during the pandemic, the League of Legends, or I didn't know it was called CSGO. I thought it was CSGO or whatever, learning how to, play those and just going off like you're brand new at seeing this stuff again. That's cool. You forget what that's like. So I get more fun out of doing that, or mucking around with EPL. And that turned me into being actually a pretty decent NHL player too. Just using our tools, figuring this stuff out, et cetera, at Stokastic. So that for me is the puzzle, the challenge, instead of doing crosswords or community theater or singing in the church choir, I'm doing this, right? So all right, put enough out there, we'll keep a little score, we'll make a little something. Yeah. The wife can go on her half marathon trips all over the US, and I'll fund those if she doesn't bother me about block and DFS. So.
All right. So I think that a couple questions come up for me from that question. One of them being, I want to get into how you are a relatively low stakes player. And that's a very relative term, because compared to a lot of people, you are playing pretty high volume. You're just not playing high volume compared to a lot of like DFS pros.
What I play in a year, Adam probably does in 2 weeks.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So it's like, it's not even close, but I'm still probably in the top 1%, if not a percentile of the top 1%, right? Of the actual daily volume of people. So.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are people who I've heard that there are people who have $1 million in volume in an NFL Sunday, on an NFL Sunday sometimes. So nowhere near them, and I'm nowhere near them either. So you're high stakes compared to a lot of people, but you are still relatively low stakes for somebody who is in the Onyx tier. So I do want to talk about how you get that done to be in the Onyx tier, but I want to save that a little bit because we got a question later on about the DK rewards tiers, and I'd like to talk about that a little bit more then. But the other question that came up is you talk about how you're into hockey and how you play all these different sports, and you're going to be taking NFL largely off from DraftKings this year. So I'm just curious, which sport or sports do you think you have the biggest edge in?
MLB for sure. It's my favorite by far. I embrace the variance. That to me is the most enjoyable. It's my favorite sport to follow. Watching, well, it's nice having the MLB package and being able to go see your pitchers or if your person's up at bat. Whereas basketball, I'll actually watch whatever game I have on the screen, right? You can get into it and not have to change as much. But for me, it's baseball. Next would be basketball. For as much as I like hockey, I don't watch it that much. It's just kind of a function of time. But it's very similar strategy wise to baseball, and the variance is rather similar in goalies approach versus pitchers and line stacking and power play stacking and stuff like that. So I do enjoy the construction and looking. I usually look at that the next morning just to see how I did. I don't usually follow along at night that much. And a lot of the West Coast games, they don't get started till 10 or 10:30 in Vancouver and
Sure.
Los Angeles, et cetera. So.
Okay.
I'm on the East Coast, so that's well past my bedtime. When I wake up to go to the bathroom, I'm kind of like, oh, wow, it's 1:30 and the game's still going on. Glad I didn't stay up and watch. Right?
Yeah, especially with baseball. All right. With your history as a successful season-long fantasy sports player, have you gotten into best ball at all?
I have. And the funny thing is, where I work for my day job now, our busiest time of the year is in the summer. Traditionally, I would be on busiest times always the end of the year, right? The end of the year bonus. What are we doing for stock grants? What are we doing for annual salary planning and adjustments? We're on a July 1st through June 30th. So our busy time is in the middle of summer, which crushes me from doing a lot of best ball. Prior to this, I would usually draft about 100 or 200 teams. When I was really into it, underdog did not exist. So it was more, you're just playing at, 8, 10, 12 man leagues. And then, you win whatever. If you have the most points at the end of week 16, you won your league. Okay. So this year I've done some on drafters because there's going to be some overlay there. So I did about, we're recording this on a Tuesday. On the Monday for Memorial Day, I did 5 there. I've done probably 10 regular season long leagues that most of them are for money, but that's managed leagues. I'll probably do another 5 before Thursday. So I'll only have around 10. I would have liked to have 20 to 50, just didn't work out for me this year, but I've listened to a ton of content, consumed it because most of the best ball information applies to the season-long managed league. So if you're doing your home league or a few money leagues or whatever, you can have it's worthwhile to listen, and then it also gets you up to speed for week 1. You know who's where, what their roles are going to be, etc. So I consume the content. It's just a matter of I can do that while I'm walking the dog or doing whatever. But then it's like, all right, well, I'm already busy and baseball content. It's like when am I going to draft?
Yeah. So. Yep. Well, it occurs to me that, so we're, as you said, recording this on Tuesday. By the time this comes out, it'll be too late to enter any best ball drafts for any of our listeners. The best ball deadline will have passed.
I wish they would just, whatever happens on Thursday gets folded in and they would keep the drafts open till Sunday. It would be so much nicer.
It would be
easier. I get why they have to close it, but it's like, come on, there's really not that much that can change in that one game. And if everybody knows it's happening and somebody reaches for a 2-touchdown performance by somebody, knock them out. It's now a 17-game season. So
right.
Knock yourself out on that overreach, because that means something else fell, right? So.
But then I guess people who drafted earlier maybe will be upset that they didn't have the same information, but that's kind of true for anybody who drafted earlier. Even now we have more information. So yeah, I can see your point there. But what I was getting at though is I was going to ask you, since it's too late for other people to draft, can you just tell me who's your secret? Who's going to blow up? Who's going to break best ball this year?
The people, I think Russell Wilson's going to have a good year. Sorry, Seahawks. As a diehard Seahawks fan, it sucks. I don't know how I'm going to watch any of the games. Sorry, Geno Smith. Oy. But I like Pollard, Tony Pollard.
Tony Pollard, yeah.
I think Elliott is just being carried by Jerry Jones. I think he's a reasonable starting running back who would be easily a starting running back on half the teams in the league, but he's more like a David Montgomery than he is, oh dear God, that look at Ezekiel Elliott. He can score on the run, he can score on the pass, he's averaging 5 yards a carry. You know, he was amazing his first couple of years, but injuries just at the running back position just take their toll. And I forget how old he is. I think he's like 27 or 28.
Yeah.
But they take the number of hits they take from high school into college. And even though now they only play a couple years in college, going, you know, to the next, before they get to the next phase, it's a lot of hits.
Okay.
I think it just wears on them. So
running backs especially, they just take so much.
Yeah. So Tony Pollard, probably my favorite. I think Sutton or Judy will do well. That's kind of the byproduct there of Russell Wilson. Albert O. Wilson is always in his last like 6 years, 5 of his last 6 years in Seattle, I think almost 30% of his touchdowns have gone to tight ends. Doesn't matter which one, he's agnostic there, but it's just he really spreads the ball around. But I think that bodes well for Albert O in the red zone as well. So those are kind of guys I'm looking at.
Mike, I hope you're taking notes because you're the only other person hearing this right now. So me and Mike can remember who EMac likes in best ball. All right, we won't get into any more best ball because it's kind of irrelevant to all the other listeners outside of me and Mike. So let's talk about process a little bit. First of all, do you do any simulations of your own or use simulations from any other outside sources?
No, I do. Everything I look at is I know you like to call it publicly available because if you just, you know, put your hard-earned cash in there, you have access to it. That's the only barrier to entry. That 95% of the information I take is from Stokastic.
Okay. So it's publicly available if you pay for it. A lot of it is behind the paywall. And yes, a lot of the Stokastic tools, you know, obviously are using simulations. The Top Stacks tool, that kind of stuff is using simulations, but you're not doing any of your own stuff outside of what Stokastic has to offer. Okay. You use an optimizer. I assume you use Fantasy Cruncher because that's also the Stokastic available optimizer. Do you create your own projections from scratch?
Nope. Everything I use is going to be from there. Now, the one thing I do that's a little different than a lot of our contributors, I don't have the sorting mechanism. I don't build the 1,000 or 1,500 or 5,000 lineups to cull it down to whatever I want. I build out what I'm going to use. Now I will run multiple crunches, which is what's called the iteration in Fantasy Cruncher. Once you run a lineup set, I'll decide what I want to keep for those, move those over to a storing crunch, and then do a new one, move the lineups I want over, etc. It's a little easier to do for football because you have a lot more time unless something crazy happens with inactives. So that strategy is a little easier. For basketball and baseball and hockey, I just kind of set floor parameters. Like I don't want less than this many points on a lineup, and I'll just have to accept if it's keeping me away from things. Like I've done this, I've been using Fantasy Cruncher. I started doing some beta testing for them, I think 7 years ago now. So I've been using it for a long time. So I have some different tricks or ways I do it just to sort of chop off the crappy lineups. And then again, it's not, you know, if I'm only playing a couple $100, I'm not going to lose sleep if it's, I will find leaks and trim them out from time to time. But what I do is my air quote process. It's pretty decent. I don't get bad lineups. I may be leaving some on the table. But again, it's a function of time for me, and it's more fun for me to have a little action on the game than it is to, you know, be absolutely perfect. If I were doing what you do or at stakes of anybody of that ilk, I would do things entirely differently. But if you're like, you know, for all of you following along at home that aren't quite the high stakes folks like me, you want a little something on the game, you want to make it interesting, there are ways to do it and use tools and make things in an economical fashion that would be the same as if you went golfing every weekend, or you did a fishing trip every year with your buddies, or you did skiing, or whatever it is. You can this is entertainment, right? The goal is not to lose money. You can actually win money, but even if it's just an entertainment expense, you can do it in a way where it's completely palatable.
So I'm actually similar to you in most sports. In MLB, I only run a crunch of the lineups. I actually use the late swaptimizer tool. So I'm just putting it in and it's making 150 lineups for me, or however many I'm playing that day. And I'm not
for those of you listening along, I finally figured out why. I think it's you and Ahabro do this. It's because all you have to do once you've done, so you just get, you upload the contest you've already entered, meaning you can't add to it without creating a new CSV. You put that into the late swap optimizer function, play around with it, make it do whatever you want to do. You get the same Fantasy Cruncher flexibility. And then when you download it, you just upload that CSV. You don't have to copy and paste it back into your lineup template. It took me forever to figure out why you guys did that.
Yeah,
and that doesn't work for me because I like to keep joining. I like to play the smaller leagues.
Okay.
That's my strategy. I don't play the giant GPPs. I prefer to play 500 people and less. So I got to constantly join those because they don't put enough of them out there. They do on FanDuel, which is why I'm looking at moving over there for NFL. They don't put enough of those out on DraftKings for me to get a full what I would like to play. So I have always adding to it as they spawn for the last 2 hours.
Okay.
So that's why I keep mine in a separate thing. But it took, I'm like, why are they going to late swap optimizer? Aha! You guys are just skipping a step.
Yeah, we're skipping a step. And it doesn't work for Showdown. So one thing to keep in mind, if you are playing Showdown, it's not going to work. It does work for like MMA, even though like you can't make any swaps after lock. It still works for MMA. I actually haven't tested on, maybe they've changed that for Showdown. Maybe it works now too. But just a note that if you are going to use late swap optimizer, it's probably not going to work for Showdown. At least it did not last year. But yeah, I'm similar to you in that I'm basically just creating the lineups that I'm going to use, and I run several crunches to get that 150 set. So it's not entirely true. But I'm doing a 150 at a time until I get exposure levels and lineups that look kind of the way I want them to. Let me take a minute away from this conversation with EMac to tell you about our sponsor, Oddsshopper. Make your best bets in 30 seconds or less with Oddsshopper. With hundreds of bets featured daily, Oddsshopper gives you the edge you need betting player props and game lines across all sports. Sign up for free now via the link in the video description below to gain access to our proprietary data, which will help you make your best bets. With expected win percentages and ROIs included, Oddsshopper uses the same DFS projections we use here at Stokastic to filter out the best bets available. Oddsshopper also features a parlay builder with optimized parlays and an arbitrage tool that identifies risk-free, guaranteed profit bets that you can make across sportsbooks. All right, so we've talked about kind of a lot of your process, just more strategy here. How much does ownership play a role in creating your lineups?
So again, I don't weight it as much, and when you're playing at the entry fee level, I mean, you can tell a lot of people are doing the same thing or similar things. They're using optimizers, they have projections, they have all of that, but there's still enough people that just degaff or don't care or whatever. So I don't get as caught up in it. I still will follow kind of what is, our ownership, which is based upon the projected player popularity for usually the largest tournaments. In some sports, we will do the smaller tournaments or the high stakes tournaments, but it's generally a decent proxy across most things. So in football, I try not to go more than 40% of anybody in football. You have to be careful, and doing football at the last minute is very easy to get these excellent point per dollar plays that you don't want more than 10% of in any circumstance come up on 90% of your lineups, and that's just a disaster. Basketball, I don't mind that as much. There's usually a reason the people are popping up that well. Baseball, I mostly focus on the pitchers. I generally like the 2 pitcher sites, so I will either hand build a couple lineups for Yahoo, usually on Fridays and Saturdays when I have time to play there, in addition to DraftKings. Otherwise, I focus more on the percentage I want for my stacks and the percentage I want for my pitchers. Those I will change. Same thing for hockey. I focus more on goalies and team stacks. Football, I will build things out in sections of which quarterback am I locking, which game stack am I trying to do, which whatever am I trying to do. Let's do that. Let's find 20 lineups we like. Let's set those aside. Now let's do it for a different group of players. I agree that what most of our contributors do when they've created their sorting mechanism to weight in probabilities and ownership and projection and product of ownership and sum of ownership, that's the correct way of doing it. I just feel like I want to get my hands in the pasta, right? I want to be mixing it in the mixing bowl, right? And that feels more like it to do it this way. Could I easily build one of those out? Yeah, I could, because I'm good at Excel, but I feel like I'm more a part of this process if I'm the one that's putting my thumb on the scale when I need to. So for me, It's more the fun and the enjoyment of it. I agree that that is the most efficient way of doing things, but where's the fun in that, right?
All right. So not as big of a role for you as it is for a lot of players. Okay. What about avoiding being duplicated? It's a kind of a different question about like your full lineup being duplicated by other players. Is that a big part of your strategy in any contest?
No, I don't worry about that at all. Now, I dramatically would for MMA, but I really only play enough there to get my little achievement points on DraftKings, and otherwise I don't worry about that. And while I like the MMA highlights every now and then, I don't really like to watch people beat the hell out of each other. It's a huge Mike Tyson fan. That was like appointment viewing back in the day when I was really into that sort of thing. But as I get older, it's like concussions and brain damage, and oh dear God, it's like they're running into a brick wall at 35 miles an hour. It's all of a sudden I'm like, baseball's so much nicer. Basketball, well, they could get a concussion when they fall if somebody undercuts them, but otherwise it's pretty nice, right? So those are kind of the sports I like. Sorry, I didn't get there, but the duplication factor, like I am very intrigued by listening to what you and Jordan Cooper Blender talk about, and people are like, oh, all they do is talk about MMA. It's like, no, you dorks, they're talking about a potentially solvable math problem, strategically anyway, with limited variables, where it becomes very, very important to understand that if you are zagging with everybody, whoever zigs, if that comes to fruition, is paid off handsomely. And the rest of you are fighting for a piece of a small-ish pie, right? Which would you rather have? You know, the dopamine hit of I'm in cashed, or taking down the whole damn thing, right? Okay, well, you have to do certain things. Same thing. You could do the same thing with NASCAR, right? You only get 6 drivers. These days, there's only like, 36 to 40 drivers in any race. You need to do something similar, or you're just going to be duplicated all over the place. For me, I just throw extra randomness on it in those sports, and I don't worry about it as much. But I'm not playing. If I was doing a 150 max, the $8, the $15 or higher, yeah, I'd absolutely worry about duplication. And same thing that you do for showdowns. I would worry about it a lot more there. For showdowns, I like to make a few lineups because I think it's incredibly fun, and I actually like the showdown football more than I do regular football, which I used to. That was like the exact opposite. I think that is because football is such a gut punch the entire day. When you're watching the whole thing, you don't know exactly what you're rooting for. There's all sorts of touchdowns you have no part of. Your people can get hurt, and then we're not even halfway through the morning games, right? And then we get the Octo Box coming on and the triple witching hour and all. It's like it's too much. It used to be fun, but now it's just too much. So I prefer, somehow now I like the showdown games better than the
you're not alone in that. I think that a lot of people have come around to showdown. Like a lot of us had that opinion of, well, what's the point of this game? Everybody's just going to be duped at the top. You're going to be like, it says the max prize is 100,000, but really everybody who wins just gets 1,000. And then eventually I think players have gotten better to the point where it's like, well, if I get a little bit different, I can take home a bigger piece if I do win. And it is more interesting. So I don't think you're alone in finding showdown more interesting as time has gone on. Now the question is how long we have before it's a little bit more solved and it's impossible to get different, and we're kind of back to where we started.
Now, part of how I combat that a lot is I play in the smaller 200 people and less, right? So it's way different than playing in those giant fields. Yeah, the giant fields, look at basketball. It doesn't even have to be the same duplicated lineup. Your scores, a 3-pointer at the end of the game can move you up or down 10% of your winnings, right? So things are so tightly packed, it becomes crazy in some of those larger fields. So that's why I like kind of the smaller fields. For me, it's about, did it work out? Did I get the strategy? You know, I like the dopamine hit of, yeah, I won. Okay, well, I didn't win eye-popping dollars, but you know, my goal at the end of every year is to play $125,000 and come home with $10,000 to $15,000, right?
Yep.
Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. If your hobby was watching movies or knitting or whatever, and you said, "Oh, I'm going to come home every year with $10,000," pretty cool hobby, right?
Yeah.
So okay, there's my hobby.
Yeah, and if you're enjoying it throughout the process and throughout watching and stuff, it's a lot of enjoyment that you get out of it throughout the year. So yeah, same page as you there. Let's talk about your process just a little bit, like in terms of how much time it takes you to create lineups and stuff. And let's start with MLB, where you have your biggest edge. How long before the first game's lock do you typically get started working on a given slate? And I realize as I'm asking this, you do content starting kind of in the morning, so that might change your answer a little bit. But in general, how much time are you spending, and what does your process?
Yeah, so if I set doing content and stuff like that aside, I can come in just using our tools and probably get everything done that I want to do in about 30 minutes. And it would be half that if we had all the lineups. So when we have these, sometimes we've been having some more imbalanced slates where there's 8 games and 6 of them are going off between 7 and 7:15. Okay, great. We're going to have most of the lineups. The rest of them, oh great, it's somebody facing the Dodgers. I don't want them. Or it's it's something else where like, well, whatever. San Francisco, keep your lineup. I don't care. I don't need it. I'm not going to play it if you're players anyway, right? So it's one of those where I can do it much faster for that. But I would say any sport, probably about 30 minutes, because I am an idiot. I mean, I'm sorry, a fanatic, and play multiple sports when it's hockey, basketball, and baseball and all that together. I have to sacrifice a few things here or there. Usually I will preset for basketball. It's easy. I just upload our projections for ownership and go plus or minus 5 to 10% on who I want to get over or who I want to get under. And that doesn't take too long to do. Sort it by the most 20 highly projected, the most 20 most popular, and the 20 point per dollar, best point per dollar. And all of a sudden you've at least physically moved up or down about 40 of the player pool. That with some randomness or uniques will get you a good enough spread that'll keep your core intact, that'll get you what you want. Baseball, it's easy enough to just look at and see, all right, here's what I'm going to do for the stacks and the ownership. Same thing for hockey using our top stacks tool. So I can get to it pretty quick. Football's the one that takes longer, because if you're not paying attention to it, you can end up with these one-offs that you would never take under any circumstance whatsoever. And then they end up being 25% of your lineup. It's like, well, I'd rather have 5 guys be 5% each than this guy at 25%.
Yeah.
How did that happen? And who do I have to go manually change? And if you cap those, all of a sudden somebody else is jumping off for 25%. You're like, no, this is not what I want. But then if you get it too tight on the player caps, then you get garbage as well, right? So football, I have a harder time doing it more quickly.
I do too. Football is the one sport where I wake up Sunday morning, and I wake up early on, sometimes like 8 a.m. and the game started at noon here in Minnesota. So I spend about 4 hours a lot of the time, and I'm just crunching and recrunching and changing my exposure levels or tweaking projections just slightly to change a little bit in terms of the exposures that I get. But it's also very rewarding when it goes well, and then super frustrating when you spend 4 hours before and then 5 minutes into the slate, you've got Nyheim Hines has his second touchdown and you're dead in the water. So that can happen in NFL. But yeah, I'm similar to you, where most sports I can do it half hour or less, really setting my lineups. Football is the one that for me also takes a little bit more time. And what do you do? Do you usually listen to live shows while you are working, creating your lineups? Yeah,
I like to listen to it. It's more it's a function of entertainment for me. For most of the sports, except for basketball, when you have to have something on that gives you the news, and then I like the immediate response or take of how someone's going to handle it or break it down. But yeah, I listen to most of our stuff on football. I'm in and out of my office doing whatever, but I'll have our 3-hour show block on and just kind of see what's going on or what people mention. Because the interesting thing now is the other reason I'm kind of going away from some of the stuff for NFL, I want to get more into the sports wagering, and in particular player props. And it's harder to do with all the other many things that are taking my time. That's something I've never been able to carve out. Now it's legal in Virginia. Plus we've got great sites like Prize Picks and other stuff where I would like to play. I need to set it, rather than me screwing around with my main slate lineups, I'd rather just play the showdown contests and then focus on some of that to see. So was it just recently legalized in Virginia? It was right before the Tom Brady Super Bowl, his last one with Tampa. Okay. So it literally was weeks prior to that. I can't remember if it was ready in December or it was a January 1st thing. That I don't remember for sure, but it was only around for a little bit before that. So it's one thing to hear the spread and this and that. And then it's another to be putting your money behind it, right? Because you're like sitting there going, all right, I'm going to put $20 down on this. I get what the spread is. I understand this. The hell is a teaser?
Yeah.
What? Okay, I get parlays. I understand that. What is it now? If I can't pick something from each team on a normal parlay, I have to do a same game parlay. What the hell does that mean, right?
Yeah.
Wait, I can't do a same game parlay and pick something from another. This is right. So you run into all these little roadblocks, and the learning curve on that I found is a little, from a user perspective, a little harder. And right now I'm just on the DK one, but I'm going to sign up for a few of them because I'd like to try the arbitrage, right, or the true line shopping, especially for college football. So we have some good stuff from that, from Matt Kajeski and from Ben Rossa. So that for me, I think is going to replace some of what I'm doing for DFS. That would fall miles behind still from baseball, hockey, and basketball for me. But it's, rather than main slate football, I'd rather do that.
Well, that brings up a question for me. So it's not legalized here in Minnesota. Yeah, we can't sports bet. I'm very much looking forward to the days when we can, and it will be a long learning curve for me as well. But the question I want to ask is, so you say that you're kind of getting away from DFS in football a little bit in favor of sports betting. Do you have concerns that DFS is going to be cut back significantly in the coming years, or going to become, kind of unbeatable because, people are getting sharper all the time. People are going to be going away to sports betting. Maybe the prize pools shrink. Do you see DFS going away as a full-time profession? Currently, I don't know how many people do it as a full-time profession currently, but do you think that's going to be feasible in 5 years?
It maybe. And so I don't think DFS will go away. I don't think it's going, what could happen is enough of those top heavy prize pools finally suck the life out of the top heavy prize pools are the most egregious thing they ever do, right? That money doesn't stay in the ecosystem, if you will. It leaves, right? If I won $1 million, great. That's not coming back in any form or fashion for me, because I won a few tickets. Here we go. I'm in the Millie Maker. I won. Sayonara. That money's coming with me. I'm not changing the way I play. I have now accelerated my retirement horizon by 2 years, right? But maybe I'll be doing DFS content full time, but I'm not going to change the way I play. Yeah. So that to me will hurt the people doing this full time. The lack of the gigantic prize pools, because people are absolute morons and don't understand how math works, will take the casual out because they can't win whatever it is. They'll still be the puzzle for people like me to play. That I don't think would ever go away. But those gaudy prize pools where I don't take my toe, those could be definitely at risk. It's a sliding scale. I think that they will come up with things to combat it. I'd like to see some innovation with some of the things we do with DFS, but the challenge we've seen is, well, one, the biggest company is in DFS, the most idiotically run company out there, but they're focused on what is the biggest customer acquisition, and that's sports betting. Yeah. And none of the smaller sites have found enough traction to challenge the big two. It's not even the big 2.5 anymore. It's just the big two. So what will we see? More sports wagering, DFS, and as a form of sports wagering like Prize Picks and No House Advantage and the myriad of other sites that do that. But could somebody grind out $250,000, $300,000 a year like they can now? Probably not. And where people think, oh, that's a lot of money. Well, no, that's like being paid like $170,000 a year, because you got to take your benefits. You got to pay both sides of the payroll taxes. You have to have a cushion. There's no retirement. If you're on vacation, you're not making money, right? So it's all of that. So people are like, oh my God, if I was making $300,000, it's like, well, and your stress and the heartburn, and there's probably 400 or so people that are doing that right now. It's a pretty small group.
Yeah, it's not a large group
of people. We feel like, oh, it's all these people. It's like, no, you just happen to know a bunch of them who are also visible because they're really, really good, or they're doing some content because it helps I can at least pay my bills and mortgage and all of that. I won't make anything more than that, but hey, that's nice. Those are important things. And then anything else I get is a positive. And if I'd like to retire or go on vacation or buy a new car or whatever, I better be good at this, right? So that hybrid will, I think that'll stay a little bit, but it's hard to tell. But I think we're a good 3 or 4 years out. We're going to have more problems with the climate and the economy and all of that before it comes down to this. So
okay. So a lot of
there'll be other
hurdles
factors that
before
kibosh it, you know, not to rain on anybody's not to make it all political or anything. But I am running for president.
You're running for president, but not with a political party, to be clear.
That's right.
Not yet to be determined.
The pizza party.
The pizza party. I like it. Pizza party.
There we go.
Go with that. Love it. I'm voting for it. All right. Let's move on to a few listener questions. Let's start with Dan Strafford had a question. Who is the best co-host you've ever worked with?
I will say the best catchphrase to open any show, any podcast ever is, and away we go. This is the fill in the blank of the podcast with Dan Strafford, blah, blah, blah. That was Dan. Dan is the great voice of everybody in all of this. He brings a nice, unique experience here, but I can't name favorites, right? I will say this. I like, because in the role I'm in, I get stuck with a lot of the new people that haven't done shows before, or I will start doing podcasts with people we need to coach up on how to do different things. So I have the pleasure of working with a lot of people early on in their we'll say broadcasting, because technically this is broadcasting, in their broadcasting careers. And that's something that I don't mind doing. Before I got into DFS, I was actually in Toastmasters for about 3 or 4 years. And just to get better at public speaking and understand different methodologies and strategies and things like that. So that is something that I've carried forward to help people with pointers, or just to start out. Does that mean I'm good at it? No. Am I better than average? Yes. Do I still fall into the same little annoying habits, crutch words, or whatever that anybody else can? Yeah, if I'm not paying attention, or I'm tired, or I'm lazy, or whatever. So, you know, you're never perfect. But to me, I would say I don't have a favorite co-host, but I think it's fun. For me, this is a huge social outlet. That's the one thing I really learned during the pandemic. Moving across the country, you know, all my friends were back on the West Coast. My family's all back on the West Coast. And you know, then they all had kids and going a million different directions, and now most of their kids are hitting college. But it's like, well, I haven't really talked to these guys in 10 or 15 years, more than once or twice, once every couple years when I go back and I try to catch up or see some people. So this for me is a huge social outlet. So for me, a lot of it is, hey, talking before the shows or after the shows, or stuff like that. So I think it's fun. I think it's great talking to all the different people that we have, because while a lot of people come from some sort of math type background, there are so many different types of math background. Like, I'm accounting and finance. You got Alex, who's was math something or other. You get actuaries. You get all sorts of different people that are in different skill sets. So you just find out different things, and this is the one common bond that we all have. So even if we don't agree on a bunch of things outside of this, we can set all that aside.
That was a very political answer, EMac, to not name your favorite co-host.
It's true. I've had so many good. I've probably done close to 2,000 shows, and I'm constantly changing pairings, because I usually work weekends or the crappy night shifts that nobody wants, or the overnight podcast. So anybody that becomes a full timer, they go on the main shows. They leave me. So I don't know. Maybe I'm harboring ill will towards a lot of people that.
Oh, I see. Well, that's gonna really help leading into Dan's next question. But first, I want to say I think you are great at this, EMac, and I think the audience loves you. So I think that speaks to how good you are as a broadcaster, if that's what we want to call what we do. I think you're great at it. But this leads to the next question, which is who is your most hated co-host? Let's get the claws out. Whether it's somebody that you hate yourself or the audience hates.
There's only one person. The person who blocked me on Twitter. I believe they were a former bachelor. They're very thin-skinned. Very, very thin-skinned. No, I had to do a bunch of podcasts with the name rhymes with Chris Randone. I had to do a bunch of podcasts with him on Sunday nights. He bailed on more of them than we actually did. So there you go, Randone. It
I
was
was
you.
I was around.
No,
for those
he's a fine person or whatever, but don't flake out. That's like number one rule. Don't flake out. And two, don't flake out in the middle of a Sunday night when you're not going to have somebody. You can't just grab somebody to do it because especially during the fall, because everybody's either drunk, hungover, or wants nothing. Hey, come on, just jump on the show. Adam's like, sends back the middle finger emoji or whatever. I try to get Greg, even Ehrenberg's like, no, I don't really want to. It's like the people that would normally do it, they're like, no, you're kind of stuck. You're like,
yeah,
but guys, it's Sunday.
yeah, not cool to bail. Not cool to bail. Yeah, I guess I'm not gonna pile on. You don't really want to get into it at all. But I think that's as good of an answer as I could have expected from you because you actually named somebody. So I'll take that. I assumed it was going to be a no comment again. Dan Stratford has a third question here. Your favorite black and white television show from your youth?
Oh, well, that would be a lot of them because until I was in high school, we had 2 TVs and one of them was black and white. And neither one of them had a remote until I think I was 15 or 16 when we got a TV that actually had a remote. I mean, we had a color TV and the cable box on top of it, but cable boxes back then, you had to walk up and move the lever up or down and then punch a button to get to the channel on one of the 3 tiers that you had. It's a disaster. Technology's come a long way. I did see that one on Twitter. The only 2 shows I can remember that were for sure in black and white. Gilligan's Island, right? Everybody's seen that when they were kids. Leave It to Beaver, I know, was in black and white. Now, again, these shows were on 30 years before I was born, right? So well before me. And then Adam 12, like an old cop show that I'm pretty sure was in black and white. Like it was a post-Dragnet type show. Like if you saw it, they're all disasters now. When you go back and see them, the plots are very, very thin on most of these. But otherwise, I think everything was in color.
I love that. I think Dan was just making an EMac is old joke. And
I know he was.
It was actually true that you had a black and white TV.
But we didn't have a black and white TV.
That's pretty funny.
We didn't have cable until I was 11 or 12. We had 3 channels, but we said 2.5 because one of them was they were all through the air, and we lived in a valley, so we had hills and mountains around us, and you'd actually do like they would do fundraising to fix the satellite transistors that were placed on the mountain, and one of them they just could never keep. It would always get hit by lightning or whatever, so it barely worked half the time. So we had 2.5 channels most of the time I was growing up until we got cable.
We were also a no cable household for most of my youth. I think we had it until I was maybe like first grade, and then my parents decided to no cable until maybe high school. We got it back. I don't know. It was once we had cable again, that was just incredible to me. But yeah, we were for most of my childhood a no cable household as well.
Yeah, and the first cable, like it was just on the dial. It wasn't even 13 full channels. It was just, but you could see things.
I think we had the 13 channels maybe when I was growing up, so somewhere around there. All right. So here's where I want to get into the question about becoming an Onyx tier member, or talk about the different tiers a little bit. Mr. Patrick had the question. I want to hear your value estimates for DK rewards tiers and, by extension, DK crowns.
All right. So the mathematical value of you need 550 crowns to make $1. So that means you would have to play, if you're just playing, you'd have to play $550 before you got $1 back. That's garbage, right? That should not move the needle for anybody. Then you get things that are missions. So depending on what type of player you are, volume wise, every day you'll get a mission, or a couple times a week on the sports books you'll get a mission, like bet 3 different 2-leg parlays of $10 or more within the next 2 days and win 200 crowns, right? And then those add up. Then you can also do what they call their milestone achievements. So like essentially play 100 days of EPL, $1 or more, play all the NFL weekends, or play, there's baseball, there's 190 days of baseball, playing 175 of them and get like 25,000 crowns. So those crowns, that's worth a little bit more, 20, 40 bucks, whatever it is. But the more of those you get, the more you go up in the rewards tier. So if you get just 25, I think it's 25,000 to get their first tier, you get 50 bucks. If you go get like 100,000 or 150,000, you get like 200 bucks. $500,000, I think you get $400, and then I think it's 500 or 1,000 if you get to their Onyx tier. And then within all of that, then because they're doing their promotions a little differently, now you get different rewards. Like I got one for being the Onyx tier. You could spend this number of crowns or cash in this number of crowns over this period of time and get X number of DK bucks. Or, you get this special offer of the NCAA tournament, right? You got that one. It's like, okay, well, there's whatever it was, 200, 300 people playing in a contest that basically at the top 150 would make at least $100 because not everybody signed up for it. It's little things like that. So if you put it all together, by the time you accumulated in some form or fashion 1 million crowns to get to Onyx, now that's a lot of money to start. That adds up. And then you start to look at all the different things and prizes and stuff you had. I think it's worth about $4,000 to $5,000 for Onyx per year. Now, for me, it makes sense to try for that because that actually impacts my ROI because I'm only spending $100K a year across the various sites. So that's a noticeable thing. Mm-hmm. For Alex, for Adam, they don't care, right?
But we're getting there naturally.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. You're like, wait, what do you mean? I get this stuff? And it's like, yeah, you don't care. It doesn't, it's not going to move the needle, but this is like the game within the game. So if you are big in airline rewards miles or, supermarket points or whatever it is that's out there, there are ways you can find little deals and stuff like that. Now that's DraftKings program. So that one is the most obvious one. Who else has a decent one? Prize Picks does these, except they do theirs a little different. Like every other month, they'll do some contest where it's like, all right, today you have to play 2 entries of nothing but golf players. All right, now you have to play the next day 3 entries. They each have to have at least 1 WNBA player. And then the next way you got to do something else. And if you do that 7 days in a row and do whatever we ask you to do, and some of them are winning a certain amount of dollars, not profiting, just winning or doing whatever, then you get a card that you can earn up to the card that lets you get $5,000 if you get all 5 questions right that you get to pick and use at any time you want, right? So, you jump through those little hoops. That's a fun one to do on Prize Picks. We had a couple people that cleared $5,000 on the hot dog eating contest of all things. They used their card that they had earned over a series. It must have been, I guess, the end of the NBA playoffs, right? It was like, pick somebody from this game and do if this person, you pick a rebound prop with this or whatever it is. And then you jump through all those hoops, you got XYZ, and then you were off and running. The most I turned my Super Bowl one into $1,000. I got 4 out of 5. Right. So those are kind of fun. And again, that moves the needle for what I do because I'm not putting a ton per se. I mean, again, if I lost every single day, I'd lose 100,000. That's a lot of money. Right.
Right.
Okay. But doing it this way, I think those are the good ways to do it. You never know what's going to be out there. You kind of have to read the little fine print. There are a few other sites that will send you an email. Hey, we'll give you a risk-free whatever. Right. So like Super Draft or I think Underdog may have done this. And then what's the other site? Monkey Knife Fight. I'll get those occasionally. Hey, you get a risk-free $20 bet. You have to do this. Somebody like this player needs to be in it. One of these 5 questions, and then do this. And then you will give you site credit if you lose. So I'll do those and jump in, right? And you hit a couple of those that are 10x or 20x, and all of a sudden your $25 is $500, and you're like, well, that was cool, right? It's hard to do, right? But you can do stuff like that. And I think that's something that a lot of people overlook. Again, the people that are doing the heavy volume and stuff, they're not going to care. It's a drop in the bucket. I mean, they have upload errors that cost them way more than any of these would ever make them back in an entire year. But for ham and eggers like me, and a lot of the other people out there, it's fun. It's the little challenges, right? It's like I don't do the video games. I wish I did once it got past the Sega 3 buttons. Once we got a double triggers, double thumb joy, that's well beyond my capabilities. But it's like the side missions in those games, right? Go save the princess, or go rob the bank and don't kill anybody, or whatever those are. That's what this is to me. So I think it's fun. Can I do it? But you got to math it out. Does it make sense? Because there are some of them that are suckers bet. Walk away from those. They're not, just because it's out there doesn't mean it's good. And a lot of the ones they put on the sports betting books, because not just DraftKings, but even some of the DraftKings ones are. But I look at the other books, suckers bet. No point in doing it. They're just coaxing you to put money at risk. That's for those of you that just want action in it. Whatever. For those of you that are trying to profit, a lot of those are suckers bet.
All right.
Just meaning you may fail. You may not. It may force you into a bet that you don't want to make. The dollar amount you can do whatever you want with, but if it's forcing you into something that you don't feel great about, don't do it. It's not worth it.
All right. All right. So I just have one more question before we kind of ask out my closing it out questions. I wanted to ask you what advice you would give to somebody who wants to do content in the fantasy sports world, but doesn't have experience in the field.
Yeah, absolutely. And I get this question all the time from people, because they're like, oh my God, we see you do all this and you do writing and you're on shows, and they don't know. We all wear back office hats. I do the contractor payments here at Stokastic. I was the scheduler and contract payment person at FanDuel. I did a bunch of behind the scenes stuff when I worked at Roto Grinders, right? You pick up a bunch of different hats. So the key thing is everybody wants to come in, oh, I want to be on a show. I'm good at whatever. I want to do it. If it's a big three sport, it's going to be hard to break in. It really, really is, just because so many people can do it. If it is more of a niche sport, you got a better chance. What is a niche sport? Well, anything that's not the big three. But then the question becomes, you better know it, and people will know real quick if you do or you don't. So like golf, NASCAR, hockey, stuff like that, WNBA. But even then, it's hard because those shows don't draw a lot of people. So we and other sites, some other sites don't even support that at all. We'll do some content for it. How can you be good at it? Well, make some short video vignettes. Nothing stopping there's literally no barrier to entry. Every computer's got a camera now and a decent sound equipment, and you can get StreamYard, record yourself doing a little video, making your pick on Prize Picks or whatever every day, and post that on Twitter or post it on YouTube or somewhere. Just get the reps in. And then when someone says, hey, we've got an opening, you can point to them, hey, look at what I've done. And your answer isn't, oh, you should put me on a show. I want a GPP. You know what? That would have worked 10 years ago. That doesn't work now. The other thing is, take any opportunity you can get. Is it writing for something? Is it filling in for someone? Is it doing an interview? Is it whatever it might be? And you get your foot in the door. First thing we do when we look to find people is, are they dependable? Can we count on them? Hey, guess what? That's the same thing. Why is that important? Because content has a very limited shelf life in DFS, about 6 to 8 hours for most of it. And then it's gone and you're doing it again the next day. People don't like that grind. And, I do 500 articles a year. That's a lot. That's more than one per day on average. Yes, that's a lot. I've done over 5,000. I like it. For me, it's a creative outlet. I am doing this for different reasons other than money. I enjoy it. It's the process. It's capturing these things. It's having a platform. It's goofing around. It's my thought exercises, right? So that does it for me. Other people were like, oh, I'm going to do this for a living. Well, while some people do make decent money being a content producer, most people, there's no barrier to entry to this job. And contrary to what all of the Twitter warriors think, that you shouldn't work for free. Guess what? If you want to get the reps, you're either doing it for free on yourself and showing people, or you've got your foot in the door. Don't waste that moment. See what you can do. Do you work for free for a long time? No. A month or two, tops. And even then, it's for when you are getting paid, it'll feel like you're working for free sometimes. Am I right, Neil?
Depending where you are. I mean, and I do work for free for when on the Theory of DFS as the regular guest on that podcast. I work for free, mostly out of just enjoyment. Is kind of the reason I do that. So
so think of it like the gig economy, right? So now the perfect example is, well, would you go drive Uber for a little bit? That's about what this is, right? You can do it from home. There's some flexibility, etc. But are you a good writer? Okay, if you're not, then it doesn't matter what you're going to write about. Okay, you're a pretty good writer, but you only know football. All right, well, guess what? So does everybody else. What can you do? What's the twist? Be like Alhambra and break something down differently. that nobody's looked at, or do something special or focused, or offer up to write player blurbs, or, you know, become a useful member in the Discord community. That's how News got El Negro Loco. That's how he got his job. He made himself indispensable. And now he's doing a bunch of customer service stuff and other behind the scenes things, in addition to running most of our news feeds. Yeah. Okay, we didn't know we needed it until we had him. Like, you know, we need this. Let's get this guy over here. Yep. T McBee, Terry McBride, super active user in chat, constantly helpful with people answering questions. Hey, we've got it. You want to be on a show? You're bringing good information. Talk to us for a second. Oh, okay, you know what you're talking about. Let's get him on air. Okay, wow, you're really good. And then he's off and running and doing a bunch of other things behind the scenes that you guys don't see that keep the company up and running, right? So that's how you kind of get your foot in the door here. And a lot of people aren't. They just think it's all, oh, I'm going to come in and do shows and do whatever. And it's like, that's the byproduct of a couple hours of research. Yeah. Right. That's why I always say, I'm doing an article today. Of course I want to do a show. I've already studied the slate. Yeah. Like, oh, we don't want to overload you. It's like, you're overloading me when you spread them apart, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. If I'm doing an article one day, a show the next day, I can imagine that's a lot tougher than just doing both on the same day, because it's the same research that goes into each. I did not realize you do 500 articles a year. That is insane volume. And then you're also doing a lot of shows, and then you have a full-time job on top of it. That's impressive. All right, let's close it up. First, where can people find you, EMac?
At EMac DFS on Twitter. Okay. I thought my DMs were open. I think they are. If you tag me or if you have questions, you can get me, or emac@awesemo.com is our email. I don't check that email, but I have it send me messages to my email when we use that one. Because people, I kept missing contributor meetings. I'm like, you guys never invite me to these contributor meetings. So like, dude, we have them all the time. Oh, I didn't know I had an email here at Awesemo.
I didn't do a ton of meetings until I started full time. Last year as a contributor, I had virtually 0 meetings. So apparently I missed that boat too, but nobody ever called me out on it. So I guess that's fine with me. All right, let's finish it off with a question that I always like to finish it off here. And you can answer about any type of format, season long, DFS, whatever. Tell me about your favorite win or win celebration in any fantasy format.
Oh, I would say my favorite win. It's always the first one, but that was like that one I told, that $5,000 baseball win right out not long after I started playing. Like I knew what slate it was going to be. I looked ahead to pitcher matchups. I knew who I wanted in my lineup. There was, I think it was, is it Ryan Hannigan or something? The backup catcher for Cincinnati Reds way back in the day. He was like a platoon player. There was like 4 platoon type players that I wanted in my lineup that day. I built my lineup at lunch and didn't change it and just let it. Everybody came in and started like I was hoping they would, etc. And I essentially led wire to wire. Wow. That was probably my favorite one. My second favorite one, and this is a good one to end on, this is what started it all. In that same September, I got, there was a contest on DraftKings, $20. It was I think it was a 40 or 50 person contest. The winner, and remember, this was like, oh shit, this was like, we didn't even know what winner take all was back then. They didn't have that format. Your prize was the next Friday you flew out and got to go to the Rotor Grinders inaugural NFL bash. Wow. And so I entered that. I think it ended up it didn't fill. It was like, if it was 50, there was 40 of us in it, something like that. And I picked that I heard about on the radio, sports radio, the local area, a young shortstop for Baltimore named Manny Machado, who hit 2 home runs that night. Wow. And I believe I led that one wire to wire. And that started this all off. I won a ticket to, my wife's like, explain this to me again. You're flying out to Las Vegas to go watch football with a bunch of people you don't know who they are. You know, your imaginary friends.
Your fantasy friends.
Yeah, pretty much. So that got me started. That party, that was wild. So obviously the original Roto Grinders, like Dan Bach, he's still around, right? Yeah. And Cal and Cam and Riley, they were the founders of Roto Grinders. But notorious Derek Farnsworth, he came He and his wife and a couple buddies drove down from, they were still in college at the time in Utah, and they drove down to that party. John Britt, JMB Wingspan, he does a lot of hockey stuff. He's still around. Head Chopper and his wife were there. Who else was there? Napster Man was there. Beer Makers fan, Chris Prince, he was there. I can't remember if it was that party or it was the next year when most of the people who were at that party ended up working at Roto Grinders in some form or fashion after that. None of us worked for them then, but of the like 30 people that were there, 15 ended up doing something with them. So again, it's all about opportunity. But he has a picture. I don't remember if it's that year or the year after, but he would go out there every year with his dad and his brothers, and they draft high stakes season long leagues.
This is Head Chopper or somebody else?
Chris, Beer Makers fan.
Oh, Beer Makers,
Chris
okay.
Prince. So back then he was the fan face of FanDuel on the back of all the draft magazines. So he has a picture of him leaning back, pointing to behind him. This guy has his bag sitting there, and you could see the top of the draft guide. It's Chris on it. And he's pointing to it, giving it a thumbs up, and his brother's taking a picture. So the guy's drafting next to the guy on the magazine and doesn't even know it. So
that's really funny.
Those were simpler times back then.
Yeah. And so did that help you get a job then at Roto Grinders? Because then you worked at Roto Grinders after that. Was that just a coincidence that you ended up working for Roto Grinders?
That gave me kind of, they knew who I was.
Okay.
They posted a job called the Weekend Warrior, and they wanted somebody to basically run their sites on the weekend. And this was before they were only doing weekday videos. Okay. So I ended up doing that like on the cheap, but it was fun. I got like $50 a day. So it was like well below minimum wages, but I was doing customer support and keeping tabs on the message board and writing a couple articles and doing projections and doing the newsletter and doing all that. But it's just like, it's kind of scratches that entrepreneurial itch. Plus you're like, this is the coolest thing ever. Maybe I could get a job out of this. And then you realize what everybody gets paid. And then you're like, well, I'm stick with the day job. But Warren Kasoy, you had him on your show. He and I were the first weekend hosts. He had just graduated high school, so he was like 17 or 18 years old. Yeah, and it was me, and we were the first weekend hosts that they had there.
That's really funny. Yeah, the age gap there of the weekend hosts.
Yes, but tune in on Sunday Night Football. You get me, Terry, and my grandson Nick Lepre will be joining us.
Same crew as last year, right? That was the same crew that did it. Okay, perfect. All right. EMac, this is a lot of fun. Thank you for coming on. I really enjoyed having you on. We haven't gotten to talk as much as I would like, but thanks a lot, EMac, for coming on to episode 22 of High Stakes. Thank you to Mike Lawrence for producing as always, and thank you for watching. That'll do it for High Stakes episode 22. You'll be able to find High Stakes episode 23 2 weeks from now. We're now on a bi-weekly schedule, so 2 weeks from now on Friday, you'll be able to find episode 23 of High Stakes. Thanks for watching. Enjoy your weekend.